But as Sunday Riley has now demonstrated, it's possible to put out just 20 shades from light to dark, okay? That's it, you know, pack it up, pack it up. 2018 is over. Sunday Riley 1 2018. Hello, and thank you so much for tuning in. Today I'm going to be reviewing the new Sunday Riley The Influencer Clean Longwear Foundation. Now, in addition to this review, I also have wear tests and swatches of 3 different shades. And no, this was not a PR package. This isn't a sponsored video. I just purchased 3 different shades. Yeah, that happened. I tried to do the right thing and go to a physical Sephora store location to find my correct shade, but you know, you go into a Sephora, the sales associate asks you what you're looking for, you tell them you're looking for a specific foundation, and then all of a sudden you've got yourself a new foundation shade life coach, and we all know how that usually ends up at a Sephora. In all honesty though, I never blame the sales associates because I feel like the lighting in Sephora is really to blame because it's always trash, which I never understand. It's a makeup store and I feel like the lighting is integral to the design of the store. Sometimes it just feels like the Sephora board of directors got together and unanimously agreed that all of their stores would have the most trash lighting they could possibly find. So I ended up ordering 2 additional shades online that I felt were within the realm of my general shade range. You might be wondering exactly how many shades are in this range. You might think 30 or 40 at least, with my skin being a little bit darker, deeper in tone. However, this foundation only comes in 20 different shades, which I think says a lot because you can see that there's a really nice gradient from really light to really dark, and I'll talk more about that in the actual review portion of the video. As for some other quick specs about the foundation, this retails for $46 and you get 1.08 fluid ounces, and of course it can be purchased at a Sephora store or on the Sephora website. I'll talk more about what this foundation claims to do in the review portion of the video as well, but I thought I'd go ahead and give you the quick little bullet points conveniently located on the front of the packaging. So basically this foundation claims to be natural looking and long wearing with a lightweight feel, satin matte finish, and medium to full coverage, and we'll get into whether or not this foundation actually lives up to those claims in the review. Alright, so I'm going to do a pretty quick test run with the new Sunday Riley foundation, which is called the Influencer Clean Longwear Foundation. I literally just picked this up from Sephora right after work, and as a matter of fact, I'll show you the time right now. It is just a little bit after 7 right there, 7 p.m. So obviously I won't be able to do like a full proper 8 to 10 hour wear test on this run. You know, I do have to go to sleep, get up for work in the morning, but if I know myself, like Drake, I shouldn't be going to sleep any earlier than 11 p.m. Plus, I've got some Thai tea, so a little bit of caffeine right there. So definitely should be able to make it to the 11 p.m. mark, if not later, because I do tend to go to bed kind of late sometimes. But yeah, I'm gonna be testing this on completely just sort of like clean skin. I just washed off the foundation I was wearing earlier today, which was the Fenty foundation, and I just used the Skin Laundry Hydrating Cream Face Wash, and I'm not going to put on any like primer or moisturizer. I find that that face wash by itself actually, you know, has my face feeling a little bit hydrated. So I'm just going to apply it, you know, straight to my skin right now. I'll wait for tomorrow or sometime later this week to test it out, you know, over my moisturizer and primer and all that stuff. But for now, I am going to just give it a really quick test run, and I think the next 4 hours will still tell us a little bit about this foundation, since I'm not going to be testing it with any other products. I am going to be just in my apartment. I'm not really going out into the elements or anything, but I will be in the kitchen cooking some chicken actually, because today is Monday and I did not do meal prep over the weekend, which means I ate out today, and I'm gonna try not to do that for the rest of the week. So I do have to do some cooking, so that'll, you know, put it to the test a little bit. I won't say much about this foundation in this clip because I should have either already talked about it in this video, or I will talk about it towards the end, because this is going to be like a full-on review video. This is just like one portion of it. Obviously I've probably already explained that, so but yeah, I'm going to go ahead and apply the foundation. I'm going to use my Japanese beauty sponge on one side of my face, and then I'm going to use my Zoeva 102 silk finish brush on the other side. It looks a little bit dirty, I mean it is kind of, but that's just like some powder product. There's no actual like remnants of liquid or cream foundation in there. I don't normally apply my foundation with a brush, but I thought for the sake of, you know, just testing this foundation out and always possible, we could go ahead and try that out. I will say the shade I have is 280. This is probably too dark for me. I walked into Sephora and unintentionally got shade matched to this foundation. But yeah, again, I won't go into that. I probably have already talked about that in some other part of this video. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it. I'm gonna go ahead and start off with just a pump here. So yeah, that's what it looks like. Pretty runny. So I'm going to apply the foundation with the sponge on this side of my face. Okay, so this is one pump of the foundation applied to this side of my face using the beauty sponge. As you can see, it is like slightly darker than my overall complexion. Hopefully it doesn't like change, oxidize, get even darker. I do feel like the shade up from this, which would have been 270, probably would have been like a good match. The undertone might be slightly different on that, but if I like this foundation enough, I may just go ahead and order the next shade up, but we will see. Oh my gosh, I lost the foundation. How did I lose it? It was literally just in front. Okay, there it is. Jeez. Okay, so now I'm just going to apply another pump of the foundation, and we're going to apply that on this side of the face with my brush. Okay, so this is the foundation applied to this side of my face using my Zoeva foundation brush here, the 102 Silk Finish. And it applied fine. I'm not seeing really any unevenness or streakiness. Again, this shade is a little bit too dark for me, but again, it'll be something I can probably generally work with. In terms of the two pumps that I use, because I use one pump for this side of the face and another pump for this side, I feel like right now what you're seeing is medium coverage. You can still definitely see some of my acne scarring. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna apply, I do have like a little bit of excess here on the back of my hand, so I'm just going to dot that over the spots and see if we can just build up the coverage a little bit. Alright, so that's with some more of the foundation just blotted over the spots where I had a little bit more hyperpigmentation. I feel like I'm still seeing a little bit over here. This side looks a little bit more covered, although this side of my face is where my hyperpigmentation is darker. I will go ahead and show you guys a close-up of what the foundation looks like as well. Alright, so I did want to show you this foundation in the little sliver of natural lighting that I do have left, and this is what it's looking like with those two pumps that we applied. And remember, this is the side where we applied it with the beauty sponge, and this is the side where we applied it with the brush. And I don't know if I'm getting like full coverage vibes from this. Certainly most of my hyperpigmentation is gone. I guess, I don't know, I'm used to full coverage foundations looking a little bit more mask-like on the face, and I'm not getting that with this, which is like not a bad thing whatsoever. In terms of how it feels on the face, like I don't feel it. It's not looking cakey either like some full coverage matte foundations can look. In fact, it just looks like my skin, but just with a little bit more coverage. As far as the finish goes, I'm definitely getting satin vibes here. Definitely not a full-on matte, but definitely not anything overly dewy or radiant. Just a really nice, very skin-like finish. I will say on this side where I use the brush, it's a little bit tackier, whereas this side it feels a little bit more sort of like set into place. But that's really all I can think of to say about this foundation so far. Can't feel it on my face. The coverage looks really natural, but still did do a good job of covering. I feel like I probably could have built it up even a little bit more, and I don't see this looking cakey or anything like that. So I'll check in a few hours and we'll see how this works. I will be really curious to see how this satin finish holds up when I am, you know, in the kitchen and cooking, because that could turn into an oily mess real quick. All right, so the time is now 11:50. So I've had this foundation on now for about 4.5 hours since I put it on at like 7:15, 7:20. And this is what it is looking like now. Not much has changed, and I haven't really gone anywhere, so it's not like much has had to change. Like I said, I did cook, so you know, there's a little bit of heat going on there, but as far as how it looks, yeah, I mean, I'm maybe a little bit shinier than I was when I initially applied it, but nothing too terrible. Obviously, we'll be putting it to the real test when I wear it for a full day, but I don't really have much else to say about this foundation so far. It doesn't feel heavy on the skin. It hasn't settled into lines, which is something that definitely most foundations, if they were going to settle into lines, they would have done so by now. So that's a good thing. We'll try to build it up to fuller coverage tomorrow, because I feel like it's still really only at about medium coverage. So maybe I'll try like 4 pumps tomorrow. I think today I only did 2. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about the foundation. It is currently 8:27. I have the foundation on, and the only other products I have on with the foundation are the Maybelline Instant Age Rewind Concealer in the shade Tan, which is this right here. And then I did set the area underneath my eyes with the Laura Mercier Translucent Setting Powder in Medium Deep. So this concealer is under my eyes, kind of here, starting or going to like about the top of the cheek. I have a little bit of it on my forehead and a little bit on my chin as well. But other than that, it's just a foundation. I did not apply any color corrector or any primer. As for the rest of my makeup, I have on the NYX In Your Elements Earth palette on my eyes. I have 3 of those palettes and I really like them. Like I said, my makeup today is rushed, so it's not the greatest. And then the L'Oreal Pro Matte Infallible Lipstick in the shade Plum Bum. So yeah, this is my makeup for today. I will check in probably not for another 9.5 to 10 hours, so we will really get to see how this wears. So I'll see you then. All right, it is currently 8:12 p.m. so rather late check-in, but this is what the foundation is looking like on my face currently. So that means I've had it on for what, like 12 hours. Yeah, as far as how it's looking now, I feel like it's almost gone, or a lot of it has basically disappeared from the bottom half of my face. There's definitely still some foundation there, because like my full like scale of hyperpigmentation is not showing through, so there's some left there, but it's kind of weird because I don't feel like I noticed it transferring off throughout the day, but that could also be sort of like my bad, because I tend to like lean on my hands and stuff like that. I also didn't use primer with this today, so I'm thinking the next time I try this foundation I will use a primer to see how it holds up. As you can see, sort of in the center of my face, I'm definitely a little bit shinier than I was when I applied it this morning. This morning kind of just had like that sort of like satiny finish, but it's definitely looking a little bit more oily now, but it's not too bad. I've definitely experienced worse. I did go ahead and order the shades 260 and 270 from Sephora, so those should be here in a couple of days. So I think the next time I do a wear test with this foundation, I will use one of those shades, whichever one is more appropriate, and I'll show you guys what all 3 of the shades look like. But yeah, this shade definitely I think needs to go back because it is definitely too dark for my skin tone. So overall thoughts on this foundation so far, as far as how it held up, not so great, but again, I didn't really pair it with anything, so I will have to try it again with the newer shade. So I'm here for another wear test with the Sunday Riley Influencer Foundation, and just as a recap, the shade that I previously tried was 280, and since then I've gone ahead and picked up the shades 260 and 270. So this is what all 3 shades look like. I think it's a pretty nice gradient. I'm actually going to go ahead and swatch all 3 of these on the chest so we can get an idea of what all of these different shades look like next to one another. So first I'll go ahead and swatch 280, the first shade that I tested out. Next up we have 270. And lastly we have 260. So I've gone ahead and let these foundations set for a couple of minutes, and here's what they are looking like. I'll go ahead and let you know what the undertones for each of these foundation shades is supposed to be. So 260 here is supposed to be tan to deep with warm golden undertones. 270 here in the middle is supposed to be deep with neutral undertones, and 280 is supposed to be deep with warm golden undertones. I'm thinking in terms of how they're looking on my chest. 260 seems to actually be the one that is blending in the best, but 270 looks pretty close as well. And as we saw, even 280 blended onto my face, albeit a little bit darker, wasn't terrible. Alright, so now that I've gotten the swatches out of the way, I think I'm ready to go ahead and start applying the foundation into my face. In the last two wear tests that I didn't use a primer or color corrector, though I think I will go ahead and do both of those steps today, since they are steps that would normally be a part of my routine. So for my primer, I'm going to be using the Shiseido Ibuki Smart Filtering Smoother, and I'm just going to apply this in the areas where I generally get oily, which would be kind of like T-zone area, a little bit on the chin. So I know I said I was going to use color corrector, but I think I'm actually going to skip that step today. One, because I actually am not sure where mine is right now, but I also think it'll be good to see what this foundation looks like without any color correction, just to see how well it covers. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and try 260 and 270 here on the side of my face, so we can just kind of see what they look like on my face. Again, that's what they are kind of like on my chest. 260 again looks really close, but 270 looks like it could be a good match as well. So I'm going to take 260 and just apply a bit of it to the side of my face here. It's looking a little bit light on my face. And then 270 right next to it. So yeah. They look quite different on the face, I feel like. Okay, I wiped both of those off. I think what I'm going to do is start off with 260 on this side of my face and see how it goes. And maybe we'll do 270 on this side. We'll see. But today I'm going to be using a beauty blender to apply this foundation, because in the last wear test I think I used my Japanese beauty sponge. So I just wanted to switch it up to see what it would be like with a different applicator. And this is like a brand new beauty blender. I just busted it out because the one that I was originally using, I don't even think it was that old, but I switch through my beauty sponges pretty often, like rotate them out, and I hadn't used it in a while and I didn't wash it, so there was like some foundation that was caked up in it and it just was not cooperating with me. It just did not want to come out of the sponge. So I was like, okay, guess I'll just break open a new one. Okay, so this is 260 applied to this half of my face with just, I think it was like maybe half of a pump, which I think it looks pretty good. I do definitely want to build up the coverage. You know what, I'll use the Japanese beauty sponge on this side of my face because I don't want to cross-contaminate the two colors. So this is what my finished foundation looks like on both sides. Again, 270 here and 260 here. I feel like looking at me, you can't really tell in person that I'm wearing two different foundations on my face unless you're just like really looking up close. Definitely this side is a little bit more golden yellow and slightly lighter, whereas this side is again more neutral and a little bit richer. but I definitely think that overall, even with 260 and the shade 280 that I tried earlier, with them both being golden undertone foundations, I still feel like they run quite neutral. I noticed that with the gradient overall, these shades tended to run quite neutral. So I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and set this side of my face with powder, since I've got an overall pretty dewy, glowy look going on right now. It looks fine right now, but as a person with oily combination skin, that is something I worry about. Again, remember, I do have the Shiseido Ibuki Smart Filtering Smoother underneath, so fingers crossed that it should prevent too much more shine from coming through on this side, which I'm not going to set. So we'll see how that goes. That primer usually never does me wrong, so we'll really be able to see how it holds up with this foundation in particular. And I'll go ahead and set this side, since this side is a little bit dewier anyway, again, because my Japanese sponge, I did not take care to squeeze it all the way out when I washed it, so it was a little extra damp. To set this side of my face, I'm just going to take my Laura Mercier translucent powder in medium deep. I'm just gonna lightly apply that all over this side of my face. All right, so I've gone ahead and set this side of my face, looking a lot more toned down now, and I'm just going to carry on about my day. It's currently 2:59, so I will check in the next few hours and we'll see how it's holding up. All right, it is now 11:29, so that means I've had this foundation on for about 8.5 hours. I honestly wasn't even anticipating to have it on for this long, but alas, I did. This is basically what is left of it, which I don't know, feels like isn't really much, which is weird because I don't feel like I noticed this foundation transferring everywhere, which is what usually happens when I notice the foundation is moving around a lot. But I definitely feel like some of the coverage has diminished. It's looking like this side is still kind of overall looking better than this side, and it could just be because I set it with powder, so that may be the thing to do with this foundation. As you can see, I'm looking a lot less shiny than I was during the first wear test that I did with this foundation, on both sides of my face actually, even on this side, which I didn't set, but I did use my tried and true primer on, so that is very promising for people who have oily or combination skin for sure, because those types of people will probably already be using some sort of primer or powder to set, so it seems to hold in place pretty well with a powder or primer. The only issue is that I don't think it was really all that long wearing, because I definitely again feel like the coverage has diminished. So that's really it for this wear test. I am about to take this foundation off, or what is left of it off, and go to sleep, and I'll probably be back at this tomorrow to give my overall thoughts on this foundation. So I know my wear tests were a little all over the place, but I do hope that they were helpful, at least in helping you determine what your shade could possibly be if you are somewhere within the same range as my skin tone. But now I wanted to talk about the actual wear of the foundation that will apply, you know, regardless of what your skin tone is. I'm actually wearing it today as well with a more sort of traditional full face of makeup, so I'll let you guys know how that is going as well. So first I wanted to talk about the shade range. Again, like I said, there are 20 shades in this line, which isn't a whole lot. I think that that's pretty standard for most companies that launch new lines of foundation. The thing is, Sunday Riley did 20 shades right. They have 20 shades going from very light to very dark, which is exactly as it should be for any given brand. I know a lot of people clamored over the release of Fenty, and don't get me wrong, I think that that launch was a really historic moment in makeup, because whether you like the brand or not, I think it really has challenged other brands to ensure that their lines are just as inclusive as the Fenty Beauty line. But the thing is, those of us who have deeper skin tones, we have had our brands that we could rely on for a really long time, way before Fenty existed. You know, the MAC, the NARS, Lancome, Bobbi Brown, Makeup Forever. Those are all brands that have had expansive shade ranges that people with deeper skin tones can rely on, you know? So it's not like Fenty Beauty is the only brand that has 40 shades. And honestly, if you're a foundation line and you have a shade offering of 30 to 40 shades and you somehow are still missing darker tones, or there are big gaps where you have your darker tones, then you're definitely doing something wrong. You know, the more shades you have, the easier it should be to be inclusive. What's more impressive to me is seeing a line that has fewer shades but is still able to cover the gamut, because I think a lot of the pushback to the Fenty release in terms of other companies that have come out with foundations since then is not every company is going to want to come out with 40 shades at launch. And I get that, that makes sense. It definitely makes sense for smaller brands, and it even makes sense for bigger companies who, you know, even though they would have the money to come out with 40 shades, don't want to do that because they don't know how well the foundation is going to do. It definitely makes sense to put out a set number of shades to start with and then expand from there. I'm not against that whatsoever, but as Sunday Riley has now demonstrated, it's possible to put out just 20 shades from light to dark, okay? Like the Tarte Shape Tape foundation, the 2 foundations that they put out, which they tried to claim came in 40 shades, but it was 2 different foundations that came in 20 shades each. So that was 20 shades of beige. Sunday Riley gave us 20 shades of a gradient. I just can't believe that it took a skincare brand who, and I was gonna say knows nothing about foundation, but apparently I did some research and they did come out with a foundation back in like 2012, which I didn't even know Sunday Riley was a brand back in 2012, I don't think. But the point still stands. We have a skincare brand whose forte is not foundation coming out with 20 shades in a gradient. I mean, I just can't believe that's what it came to, and that's what it took. But if Sunday Riley, a skincare brand, can do it, then that just shows us that any brand can, that a Tarte can do it, an Urban Decay can do it, a Too Faced can do it. So that's it, you know, pack it up, pack it up. 2018 is over. Sunday Riley won 2018. But I just had to commend them on that because I think that the shade range is impressive and it shows us that you don't have to have 40 shades to be inclusive. You can do it in 20. You could even do it in 10 if you really wanted to. And I think people would be okay with that because even though you may not be able to find a perfect match, you would be able to find something that was close enough, and the company could then have their time, you know, do their little market research and figure out if people like the foundation enough for them to go ahead and expand. So I like how they did this and I want to see other companies follow suit. All right, I think that's enough gushing over the amazingness of their gradient. I can separate the awesome feeling I felt seeing this beautiful gradient of just 20 shades from my actual thoughts on the foundation and the claims that it makes, because to be honest, it makes a lot of really bold claims. I mean, when you really break it down, this foundation, the way that they word it, makes it sound like it could work for anybody, which I think is just marketing on their part. I mean, like, any brand would want to make their product sound as appealing to as many people as possible. So I'll go ahead and touch on some of the claims that are also on the back of the box as well. There's a whole little paragraph here that I'll go ahead and kind of paraphrase. But in addition to everything that I've already said, it basically says that this is supposed to last you even through workouts, humidity, or days when you're feeling extra oily. So there we have a sort of plug for people who have oily skin. It also says that this is going to be quick to apply and easily buildable in addition to being lightweight, and that this is going to conceal redness, large pores, and dark spots without settling into fine lines. And that was something that was important to me because I do have fine lines, you know, underneath the eyes. I do have smile lines, and I typically do have trouble finding foundations, especially more full coverage foundations that don't emphasize those areas or start to settle into those areas after a few hours of wear at the very minimum. It also says this controls oil but never dehydrates the skin, so I think that's our plug there for our dry skinned people. Got some skincare gimmicky ingredients like Canadian willow herb, oat, chamomile, ginkgo biloba, green tea, and northern truffle extracts. So like I said, this foundation makes a lot of claims and I think it tries to appeal to a lot of people, but I really think that this foundation is going to suit a very specific kind of person. First and foremost, the thing that stood out to me the most is I don't think that this is a medium to full coverage foundation. I think it's actually a light to medium coverage foundation. I am wearing it today, and as you can see, I built it up a good bit, but I definitely feel like you can still see through to some of the imperfections on my face. I actually used 4 pumps today, which I believe in the previous wear tests that I've done, I've only used up to 3 pumps. So I really tried to build it up today, and I feel like this is as much as I'm going to get out of this foundation. It also started to feel a little bit heavier as I started to build it, which makes sense because 4 pumps is a lot of product. It wasn't a feeling that lasted. Like, I don't feel the foundation on my face now, and I've had it on for several hours. You're definitely going to reach a limit as to the amount of coverage you can get with this foundation. Now, that being said, building it up was actually a really nice experience because it didn't look cakey. So the fact that it claims to be natural looking foundation, I think, is spot on. I think that this is a really natural looking foundation. It does not emphasize any texture. It doesn't look cakey. But again, that's something we would normally associate with medium or more full coverage foundations. And again, I really think that this is light to medium. But even on the heavier medium spectrum of things, I still think this foundation ends up looking very natural. Another claim that I wanted to address is the whole like long wearing claim and the whole like it'll last you through workouts and humidity and even on days when you're extra oily. As you could probably see from the wear tests, I felt like this foundation almost at some points seemed to kind of like evaporate off of my skin. I would look in the mirror and see that it looked like foundation was kind of almost missing from my face. And I think that that has to do with the fact that this foundation never really seems to kind of like set into place like most foundations do. That being said, I didn't really notice it moving around or transferring a bunch everywhere, which is normally what would happen if that was what a foundation was doing. But weirdly enough, I don't feel like this was getting everywhere or being super messy or starting to look sort of like unbalanced on the face. It's just that it still didn't really hold up on my face as well as it sort of boasts to. So this foundation almost ends up feeling like a moisturizer on the face, which I think actually is not a bad angle for a skincare company. As for the satin matte claims, I do think that that was, you know, a pretty decent claim for this to make. I would definitely say this airs more on the true satin side of things as opposed to a satin matte, but this definitely was not a super dewy or oily looking foundation. I do have oily combination skin, so anytime I use foundations that are kind of like dewy or radiant, they can tend to look a little extra on me, but I definitely didn't get that out of this foundation. I also didn't find that this settled into fine lines, which was great. Like I said, that is an issue that I tend to have with foundations, but it does tend to be an issue that I have with, again, fuller coverage foundations. And because this isn't fuller coverage foundation, it's not really a problem that I would have expected out of it anyways. So who exactly is this foundation for? I really think this foundation is going to be more for somebody who wants something a little bit on the lighter side that they can build up to medium, that you can kind of just throw on and go out the door. I don't think that this is really going to be for somebody who wants that sort of full coverage, glamorous type of foundation look, which I feel like is kind of where the marketing with this foundation was going, you know, with it being called the influencer. I really don't think this is going to give you influencer slash Instagram glam type of foundation, which isn't bad, of course. And I think, again, for Sunday Riley as a skincare brand, this type of foundation to me makes a lot of sense for them. But if you're not looking for those things, if you're not looking for a sort of lighter foundation that is going to feel more like a moisturizer that, you know, you may have to kind of touch up on, you know, if you have like oilier skin, or make sure that you do set it with powder if you have oilier skin, or if you're going to have issues with it maybe sort of fading throughout the day as well, then I don't think that you would want to reach for this foundation. You know, this isn't your Estee Lauder Double Wear or even your, you know, Fenty foundation. This is definitely something that's a lot lighter, that's a lot more subtle. So while I don't think that this foundation lives up to its claims, which is kind of a big issue, I do like this foundation. I don't think that it's a bad foundation. In fact, I am going to be keeping the shade 270. I feel like that is the shade that will work the best for me currently, even though I feel like the undertones in it weren't quite right, which is another thing I wanted to touch on. I feel like at least with the 3 shades that I got, they did such a good job, I think, of keeping the undertones pretty neutral. Even with 260 and 280, which were supposed to be warm golden undertone foundations, they weren't so overly golden that it would appear weird on, say, somebody who has maybe more neutral or even more red leaning skin tone. So I feel like you will really be able to find something that comes at least somewhat close to what your coloring or skin tone is, because their undertones here seem to be pretty neutral, which again I think is a smart choice when you are only going to be doing 20 shades. You want to make sure that the undertones are going to be as neutral as possible so that the foundation has a chance to suit potentially, you know, more than just one exact skin tone. That being said, I'm going to continue to wear this foundation, and I will be doing a month in review video at the end of this month. So if you're not already subscribed to my channel and you want to hear any potential updates I have for this foundation, then definitely feel free to subscribe to this channel. And for those of you who have watched, thank you so much for doing so, and I hope to see you in my next video.